Hello, BookTube, and I'm coming to you this time with a video that's probably quite niche. It's got to do basically with two science fiction anthologies. To talk about the American version of it, the original, the first editions of it, and then the UK versions. And the reason why I've done this is because it's come up in like doing New Worlds November with science fiction. It's and talking to my fellow co-hosts, and there's been a lot of, and even myself looking up material. You notice that there's differences in stories between the American version and the UK versions. I'm not going to go into the reasons for these because I don't actually know the reason. There can be many reasons here. The copyright, publication, the author, all sorts of things. But I'm going to go back to the early days of hardcover science fiction, and the very early days of that for mainstream publishers was basically 1946. Up until that point, no mainstream publishers wanted to deal with science fiction for the most part. And what I'm saying here are just sort of, generalities as well. There were some, beginning to have paperback publications, very cheaply made paperbacks, and there was the mainstay, which was the pulps previously and now turning into the digest, because basically by the end of the Second World War, pulps as they actually were fading very fast. There was only a few that were continuing to use the pulp um, shape and paper, and they were shifting more towards the digests magazines. And the first, the sort of well, the first one I'm going to deal with is not the first one published, but there were both these were 1946. The first one I'm going to deal with is Adventures in Space and oh no, sorry, Adventures in Time and Space, edited by J. Francis McComas, and Raymond J. Healy and J. Francis McComas. Um, uh, Raymond J. Healy was an editor. He lived from 1907 to 1997. I've made some notes here, culling from some books I have, just so I can remember it because I won't remember all the details. So he lived from 1907 to 1997. He was an editor. He edited about five or six anthologies of science fiction, going up into the late 50s, I suppose. J. Francis McComas was also an editor, and he began with Anthony Boucher to edit the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and he was there from its inception in 1949 to 1954. He lived from 1911 to 1978, and he published a lot of books edited, and I believe he actually did some did some writing under a pseudonym possibly, and maybe his own name as well. But the Adventures in Time and Space was a massive undertaking. It was 1,000 pages with 35 stories in, and it was published by Random House. A second printing was done a couple years later, but it was missing five stories. I don't know why it was. I've never really actually tracked it down. But then I think in the late 50s, a modern library giant was published, and it returned the 35 stories. And most of the story, or pretty well all the stories, were drawn from astounding science fiction, and it's been cited as the one of the best, if not the best, anthology of golden age science fiction. It has wonderful stories in. As I say, there's 35. You can look up the contents online. Now, later, in the UK here, it was a stripped down version was published in 1952. Um, this has a wonderful cover, and it goes over to the spine as well. As you can see, the jacket's in rough shape. I bought this. I probably around 2015 or so. I was getting back into reading science fiction. I used to have a modern library giant of the full book, and I came across online one that was a reasonable price. Like I thought, like 15 or 20 pounds or whatever it was, and then shipping. And it said that it was like, they called it near fine condition for the jacket as well. So I thought that's a really good price. I'm happy with that. So I ordered it. But this is what arrived. So I was not pleased at all. I complained that I was refunded my money and was told to keep the book. So I have. And I've put it in a dust jacket protector just to protect the jacket. It is quite carved up a bit. But there are, let me just count here again. There are 11 of the 35 stories in here. And they are great ones. There's The Roads Must Roll by Robert A. Heinlein. The Seeds of the Dusk by Raymond J. Gallen. Flight into Darkness by Webb Marlowe. Time Locker, Louis Paget. Mechanical Mice, Maurice A. Hugie. Adam and Noe, Alfred Bester. The Link, Cleve Cartmill. Pardon me. The Sands of Time by P. Schiller Miller. And A Master of Size by Harry Bates. A Matter of Size, sorry, by Harry Bates. Nightfall by Isaac Asimov, and The Twonky by Louis Paget. It is missing The Master by Harry Bates, which was the basis for Day the Earth Stood Still. And he was also editor of Amazing Stories, or no, Astounding Stories in the 30s. But yeah, so it's missing a lot, out of the original U.S. publication. But it is just a wonderful book. This one is like I love the jacket, and this is published by Grayson and Grayson. And as I say, it's old, it's rough, but it's still like I'm happy to have it. And I don't know how it's going to come, but I ordered I think it's the Modern Library Giant, or at least that's what was listed as, from the Netherlands, and it says that it should be here by December 22nd. So, and it was cheap. It was extremely cheap. So I don't know. It's pot luck basically. But if it does come and in even that condition, and it is the correct one, I'll be overjoyed with it. But we'll have to wait and see, because I keep looking for it, and you can get it, but it is pricey. But it's been considered the best early anthology of science fiction. Now the second one that I'm going to look at was actually the second one was a later publication in 1951. However, the editor, we'll get to that and talk about the other book that predated by a few months, The Adventures in Time and Space. The other one that I have here is the British version, is called Possible Worlds of Science Fiction. It's a collection edited by Groff Conklin. Groff Conklin was a prolific early anthologist of science fiction. He lived from I don't have his date, 1904 to 1968. The Possible Worlds of Science Fiction was published in 1951. I might have said 1952 already, but I am not sure. But 1951 by Vanguard Press. at this time. And then in the 1950s, there began to be a lot more hardcover mainstream publishers publishing science fiction, in either novels or in anthologies. So it began to ramp up. And this is, I'm talking about the U.S. Aspect of science fiction. The UK had another rather unique um, history of the publication of science fiction in books as opposed to magazines. There were a lot more magazines in the US than there were in the UK. But getting back to the books, the possible worlds of science fiction, there were, in the original one by Vanguard Press, there was 22 novels and short stories. And as I say, Groff Conklin did edit to the first mainstream published book, and that was called, oh, blimey, that sort of slipped my mind. A treasury of science fiction. And sorry, I can't remember what the publisher was, and I didn't write that down for some reason. But yeah, it was published in 1946. It was the first one. He proposed this earlier, but it took several years to get it done, and it is like the Adventures in Time and Space, but it includes magazines, a few more diverse magazines, or more magazines than just astounding science fiction. But it's not held up as highly as the Adventures in Time and Space in general, but it's still a fabulous um, anthology, and it's been reprinted many times, even into the 70s, into like Bonanza books. They're basically done for the remainder market. And again, it is early science fiction. It's golden age science fiction. And he was prolific in anthologies. He published about 40 anthologies in total. And then he was the book critic for Galaxy magazine from 1950 to 1954. So basically 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it's best. Oh no, sorry. I do apologize. It's not the treasury. He did do a treasury of science. There is a treasury of science fiction, but the very first one is the best of science fiction, which was 1946. It was 800 pages, give or take, long. So a little shorter than the Adventures in Time and Space. And it had a lot of stories in as well. Like I say, it was a treasury of science fiction is another early anthology that is very well thought of. And that one is reprinted, as I say, in Bonanza and other ones. There's a number of early anthologies that were very important. There's a handful of them that were very important, that actually helped promote science fiction, and are well thought of by historians of science fiction and fans of science fiction for the period. But getting back to possible worlds of science fiction, with the 22 novellas and short stories in 1951, the British edition, this is it. And I bought this knowing what it was, because I had the other one. And this was very, very, very cheap. I got this one probably about 5 years ago, I think. I don't think I paid, not even with shipping, not even £10 for it. And this was published in 1952, but this is the second printing from 1953 by Grayson and Grayson again. And it's still edited by Groff Conklin. And it's split up into two parts like the original, stories about the solar system and then stories about the galaxy. And there are 13, I think, in this one. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 13. And it does include a Clifford Simak story in here. And it includes stories by A.E. Van Vogt, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, Margaret St. Clair, Murray Leinster, Jack Vance, Paul Anderson, Samuel Merwin Jr., John Berryman, D.L. James, Raymond Zed Gallum. So yeah, so it's again a cut down version of the American edition, which I always find strange because I see that all the time. Like there is the there's some Isaac Asimovs that were the same, but then vice versa. Sometimes there were stories added in the American versions of British editions. And it's not uncommon for these things to happen. The reasons are going to be specific to the publication, obviously. But the other one that I'm thinking of is Clifford Simak's All the Traps of Earth. The British edition is missing two, three, maybe 4 stories from the original one. So it wasn't uncommon, and it was right from the beginning that this was happening. But I just thought it was very interesting to, this kind of thing, because I am interested in the bibliographical aspects of books, and the differences and things like that. I do think that these British covers outmatch the American editions of them, but it would be nice if they were complete. But yeah, just look at how beautiful these are. And I've never really looked for other ones. There's listed ones on the back, and I'm sure they're the Grayson and Grayson publication. Like there's Best Science Fiction Stories by E.F. Blyer and T.E. Dicty. They put out sort of for about 5 years a yearly one. And then there's Galaxy Reader and the year's best science fiction novels. That's the Blyer and Dicty again. And so they might very well be like this and cut down versions, but I love them, and it'd be something that I would love to get more of, but I've never searched for them. But anyway, if this is something, I'm hoping somebody finds this of interest. And I do apologize, I got mixed up with the Treasury of Science Fiction, which is another one, as I say, to the Best of Science Fiction, which was the very first one by Conklin. And he was basically a pioneer editor in that sense of getting science fiction anthologies, and his introductions are short in general, but they're quite insightful, and they do keep them in here. The introduction is it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-page introduction, and then there's a little paragraph for each section, and then there is a paragraph at the beginning of each story, like with a little bit of description of the story. So Becky Scott and Becky Bryant were talking about where anthologists give some dates and stuff, but they don't tell you what the story is about at the beginning. Groff Conklin, from what I remember, that was a lot of what he did. Not all anthologists did that. But anyway, if you have any anthologies that are your favorites for sort of this period, I'd love to hear, or any other period, basically. I know there's tons of them, and there's new ones. There's the yearly ones, which are very, very interesting as well. But there's great ones that encompass like these, I think, especially the Adventures in Time and Space and the Best of Science Fiction, encompass a period, the full sort of golden age, because after 1946 things started changing in science fiction, especially in the late 40s, and and most especially in 1949, 48, 49, with the advent of the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and then 1950, Galaxy. That sort of very much changed science fiction, and then there was more changes as time went on. But this encapsulates science fiction for the time, and there's another great one that actually goes right up into the 60s. It's Isaac Asimov's and um, Greenberg. I'm trying to think of his first name. It's H initial. Well, anyway, Greenberg. But they're year by year, and it starts out, I think, like 1938 or 39, and then there's a 40s, 1940, 41, and it goes right up, I think, to about 1965. Those are very, very good, because if somebody has all 22 or 24 volumes of that, they've got a perfect overview of science fiction during that time. And again, it may not be everything that you like, but if you're interested in looking at the overall uh, type of science fiction that was being written every year, or the best examples of it, um, that those are great. And like I say, there are dozens and dozens, there were hundreds of anthologies made, because science fiction was or started in the United States as a short form um, medium, short stories in the pulps and the magazines. Anyway, I'll leave you there because I am starting to ramble. And again, I hope you enjoyed this, and do. You can email me. It's down below, my email address, or send me or put a message, a comment. Thank you, BookTube. Talk to you soon.